Hey everybody, Justin Seeley here. Thanks for checking out this tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create this composition called Starry Night, where I've taken a photo that was shot in the daytime, looking like this, and turned it into a composition that looks something like this. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll go over to the Starry Night start file right here. And the first thing I need to do is I need to make a selection of the mountain so that I can see the starry sky background. So I'm going to use the lasso tool, believe it or not, because I'm just going to make a rough selection inside of the mountain. I'm not going to worry about getting very technical here because I just want a very quick, rough selection around the outside. You can see here I'm not hurrying at all. I'm just going through making a selection. I want to make sure that I'm getting everything around the edges here that is solid rock. I don't want to worry about any of the trees or anything like that, because once I make this selection, I'm going to jump into the Select and Mask workspace. Now, I know a lot of people give this workspace some flack, and I've been one of them, but in certain cases, it does work very well, and this is one of them. So let's click on Select and Mask. Once I do that, it's going to jump into the Select and Mask workspace, and the first thing I do when I get in here is I check Onion Skin as my view. Then I can adjust the opacity to see more of the sky or less of the sky behind it. In this case, I think about 35 to 40% works well. Let's take that down to about 35, somewhere like that. Then I'll use my Refine Edge Brush tool here. And all I'm going to do is just paint along the edges to sort of bring back in areas that I might have missed with the lasso tool, which obviously is quite a bit. So once I do that, we'll go along, paint all those edges back in. It's even picking up the trees, which is nice. And then once I do that, the first thing that I always do is I go and I take a look at this on black, just to see how well it has covered a lot of the areas. You can also choose on white if you want to, but this gives you a better idea of what's happening. And in some cases, you may even want to go over here and grab the brush tool. And with the brush tool selected, you can go in and you can actually see the black and white mask. And you can go in and you can clean up some of the areas that might be affected by this. So once I do that, I can come in here and just start brushing around. And I'll increase the size of the brush. And I actually increase the hardness to 100%, making it easier for me to make that. And that way I can clean that up. That's a little too big. Shrink that down just a little bit. That way I can come in here, get a lot of those areas that need to be absolutely solid rock all the way across. I'll leave some of the areas alone so that they shine through, like the trees, everything like that. And once I've done that, we'll go back to onion skin mode so I can see what it looks like. And there we go. And let's hit the transparency. Looks pretty good. Next thing what I'm going to do down here at the bottom is hit decontaminate colors. That's going to darken the edges of this a bit, kind of unifying the appearance, but it also keeps the lighting up here in the top. And then I'm going to select on the output section, new layer with layer mask. Now, why am I doing that? I'm doing that because it's going to create a duplicate of the original layer, and that way it's going to leave the original layer alone, giving me a non-destructive workflow and allowing me to get back to that original layer should I make a mistake. So let's go ahead and hit OK. Once I do that, there's my new layer with my layer mask, and now I can really start getting to work. So once I do that, I'm going to select this background layer here. And with the background layer selected, I'm going to make a copy of it, Command or Control J. And once I do that, I'm going to run a filter where I'm going to blur this layer. Now, it's not the traditional blur that you might think. It's not like a Gaussian blur or anything like that. We're going to go up to the filter menu, choose blur, and we're going to select something called average. And this is something you might not have used before. The average blur basically takes all of the colors that are inside of a composition. Basically, you can see it's primarily blue except for the white stars, and it gives you a solid color layer based on all of the color that it sees in the composition. So when I hit average, I get this solid blue layer that I can then take above all of the layers. So in this case, I'll take it all the way above this. And since I don't want it affecting the original background layer, because it's already got the blue in it, I'm going to clip it to the new layer mask layer that we created. So I'm going to hold down the Option key on the Mac, Alt key on PC, clip that layer just like that. You'll actually see the starry sky come back in behind it. Then we'll change the blend mode of this down here at the bottom to color, and you'll see that the mountain comes back in, and then we'll reduce the opacity way down to something like 40%. That way we can still see it, but it unifies the color appearance just a little bit. So now what we're going to do, to add a little bit of contrast to this, we're going to create another copy of the background layer, move that on top of this, and once we have that on top, we're going to set the blend mode, and you can do this on your own personal choice here. You can use overlay or soft light. I prefer soft light. It's a little bit lighter than the original. And we can go down and set the opacity to something like 50%, something like that. Once it's set to 50%, I'm also going to give this the same layer mask that the original mountain had. So I'll just hold down the Option key on the Mac, Alt key on PC, drag that up, drop it in. That way I don't have stars impeding on top of my mountain layer. So once we have that, we're going to create a curves layer on top of this because it still doesn't really look like this is at nighttime, right? So we're going to grab the adjustment layer icon and we're going to go to curves. Now I've already created a preset inside of curves. So I'll double click on this and I'll move the properties panel out so you can see this. And I did this to save time. So I'll switch my preset to something called dark night. And when you see that, it is going to be very, very dark. Now what I did here is I went into each individual channel, so the red channel, and I basically took the red channel down about 60 to 70% of the way down over here on the right hand side. And then I took the midtones right here and I kind of drug those down too to make those a little bit darker. With the green channel, I took that down not quite as far, just about 50% of the way down, 50 to 65%. And I also made the midtones just a little bit brighter than I did the red because I want some of that mid-tone area to pop through. And then finally with the blue channel, what I did was move that a little bit higher because I want the blues to really shine through, and I also popped up the midtones just a little bit. Then for the RGB, the overall composite, all I did here was leave it alone. I didn't do anything to that whatsoever. So let's go ahead and we'll bring the properties panel back to the adjustments. Move that over. That way it's in the same place and I know where to get it. And then on top of this, we're going to add a new curves layer. And the new curves layer that we add above this is going to brighten it up just a little bit. So we'll go back up to curves. And inside of the curves panel, what we're going to do is we're just going to drag this back out here. And we're going to brighten it up a bit. So what we're going to do is take the midtones and we're just going to drag those up until we're happy with where this goes. So in this case, I'll move it a little bit up and to the left, something kind of like that. Then we can move the properties panel back. And you can see there that we're really making this look like it's at night, which is super cool. So we're going to merge this into one single composition. So what we're going to do is hold down basically the entire left side of the keyboard. Hold down Shift, Option on the Mac, Alt on the PC, Command on the Mac, Control on the PC, and then press the letter E on your keyboard. E as in echo. That's going to create a merged copy of this scene. And once we do that, we're going to go into the filter menu, go into Camera RAW, and basically we're going to punch up the contrast in here. I'm going to do that with clarity. So I'm going to add a lot of clarity to this, making it very refined, very, very dark in the shadows, very light in the highlights. And that's also doing that in the stars, but we'll fix that in just a minute and we'll hit OK. Once that processes that, what I want to do is duplicate this layer mask again. So we'll drag that up, holding down the Option or Alt key, release. You can see there that the sky is left alone and we get this nice dark mountain here. Once we have that applied, we'll create another copy of this. And then we'll invert the layer mask because we want to work on the sky. And with the sky selected, what I want to do is I want to go over here to my tools. And inside of the tools, I'm looking for the dodge tool. And with the dodge tool selected, we're going to increase the size of the brush quite a bit to simulate a little bit of maybe some moonlight behind the mountain here. And I'm going to increase the exposure to something like 75%. Make sure that I'm working on the shadows, and I'm just going to illuminate, making sure I'm working on the pixel layer, not the layer mask. I'm just going to illuminate some of this area back here behind it. And I can just click until I'm satisfied with what it looks like. Now, if you don't think that the edges of this are dark enough around that, you can go to this layer underneath, and you can grab the burn tool, and that's down here towards the bottom. And what I would suggest is switching this to the midtones, making sure the exposure is way up there, and just going across and just kind of darkening in any of the edges that you see. Be careful not to go around the edges where the light is, and also don't work with a hard edge brush. So let's do that. Let's go in and actually do the shadows instead of the midtones. That makes a little bit more sense. There we go. Add in a little bit of shadow detail. Something like that. Now, if you still feel like the mountain itself is a little too dark, that's cool. You can go in and make a levels adjustment on that. So you can kind of darken up the midtones or lighten them up, either way. In this case, I think they need to be a little bit darker. Something kind of like that. And then hit OK. And so there we go. We have our fully composited nighttime scene, and looks kind of like the original, maybe not quite as much clarity and things like that, but you can go in and dodge and burn as you see fit around the outside. And that, my friends, is how you turn a daytime scene like that mountain. You can see where we went through all these layers. So here's exactly where we started originally, and then here is where we got to eventually when we were finished. So from day to night in just a few short and simple steps. So there you go. That is the tutorial. Thanks for watching here on my YouTube channel. You can also follow me on Twitter at Justin Seeley. You can go to facebook.com/Seeley Training to check out my Facebook feed where I do a lot of live broadcasts. And also don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more free tutorials that'll be coming out soon. Thanks everybody. See you next time.